The desert has a way of preserving secrets, but Petra perfected it. For centuries, the rose-red city stood as a monument to human brilliance, carved into stone with precision that still feels impossible today. Travelers came, historians studied, and millions stood before its most famous facade, convinced they understood what they were looking at. A treasury, a tomb, a symbol of wealth and power. That was a story everyone accepted. But beneath that story, something else was waiting, something deliberately hidden, carefully protected, and never meant to be uncovered. Long before modern archaeology arrived, the people who lived closest to Petra understood that certain places were not meant to be treated like the others. They didn't need instruments or surveys to tell them that something was wrong. Their knowledge came from observation, from patterns repeated across generations, from rules passed down without explanation. Stay away after dark. Don't linger too long. Don't touch the ground near certain structures. These weren't myths meant to entertain. They were instructions meant to protect. And what makes those instructions unsettling is how consistent they remained over time. Stories change. Warnings don't. When early explorers reached Petra and documented its wonders, they also recorded something else, though they didn't fully understand its importance. Local guides would rush past certain areas, refusing to stop. Camps set near particular structures reported strange sensations, subtle at first, then harder to ignore. Vibrations beneath the ground, sudden drops in temperature, a metallic scent that appeared and vanished without warning. Individually, these details could be dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern that was too precise to ignore, even if no one could explain it. For decades, archaeologists focused on what could be seen. Petra's facades, tombs, and temples told a story of wealth, trade, and artistic mastery. The Nabateans were celebrated as skilled engineers and builders, capable of transforming harsh desert landscapes into thriving urban centers. But there was always an assumption underlying that narrative, that everything important was visible, that what mattered had already been discovered, that the surface told the full story. Then came the anomalies. It started quietly, buried in reports that never gained public attention. Subsurface scans hinted at unnatural formations beneath one of Petra's most iconic structures. The data didn't align with natural geology. Straight lines, sharp angles, a void where there shouldn't have been one. At first, these findings were treated cautiously, even skeptically. Equipment errors were considered. Environmental interference was blamed. But as more scans were conducted, the results remained the same. Something artificial existed beneath the stone and had been placed there intentionally. Attempts to investigate were met with resistance, not from the environment, but from institutions. Proposals were delayed, denied, or quietly ignored. Official explanations pointed to structural risks. Excavating near ancient monuments is dangerous, and preserving them must come first. That reasoning made sense on the surface, but behind closed doors the language shifted. Concerns weren't just about damage. They were about exposure, about what might be revealed if the ground was opened. When permission was finally granted, it came with conditions unlike anything seen before. Every movement had to be documented, every layer removed with extreme precision. Sensors monitored the surrounding stone in real time. The process was slow, deliberate, almost cautious to the point of hesitation. It wasn't just excavation. It was controlled entry into something unknown. The first breakthrough came with the discovery of a staircase carved directly into the bedrock. At a glance, it seemed unremarkable. Petra is filled with carved pathways and hidden chambers. But this staircase was different. Its angle was steep, its width narrow, its design impractical for regular use. It wasn't built for convenience or ceremony. It was built with a single direction in mind, downward. As the team descended, more inconsistencies appeared. The walls lacked decoration. No carvings, no inscriptions, no symbols. In a city where nearly every structure carried some form of artistic or cultural marking, this absence was striking. It wasn't unfinished. It was intentional. The silence of the walls felt deliberate, as if they had been designed not to tell a story. Then there were the marks. At first, they were subtle, irregular grooves etched into the stone at about arm height. They didn't match any known construction tools. Closer analysis revealed patterns consistent with repeated friction, as if something or someone had pressed against the walls over time. These weren't decorative. They weren't accidental. They were evidence of force, of movement, of resistance. The deeper the team went, the clearer it became that this space did not follow the rules of a traditional burial site. Tombs are designed for access, for visitation, for remembrance. This place was not. Every structural element pointed in the opposite direction. It restricted movement, limited space, and reinforced boundaries. It wasn't meant to be entered and exited freely. It was meant to hold. At the base of the staircase, a sealed chamber waited. The seal itself was extraordinary. Perfectly fitted stone, no gaps, no signs of erosion. It had remained intact for centuries, untouched and undisturbed. Opening it required careful effort, not just to preserve the structure, but to prepare for what might be inside. When the seal finally broke, the air that escaped told its own story. Stale, heavy, carrying traces of decay and something harder to identify. Inside, the arrangement of remains immediately defied expectations. Bodies were present, but not in the way any known burial tradition would suggest. Positions were unnatural, almost chaotic. Some were face down, others bent at sharp angles. There were no valuables, no markers of identity, no signs of ritual. Instead, there was an absence, a deliberate stripping away of anything that might connect these individuals to a larger narrative. The walls bore evidence of fire. Layers of soot suggested repeated burning. Not a single event, but multiple occurrences over time. In a sealed space, this detail carried disturbing implications. Fire consumes oxygen quickly. Without ventilation, it becomes lethal. The presence of repeated burn layers indicated that whatever happened here was not accidental. It was controlled, repeated, and intentional. Further analysis revealed signs of restraint. Skeletal structures showed patterns consistent with prolonged binding. Joints displaced in ways that suggested restriction rather than natural decay. These were not individuals placed gently into rest. They were confined. One detail stood out above all others, a smaller skeleton positioned close to a larger one, as if held tightly. The positioning suggested something deeply human, a final attempt at protection in a situation where protection was no longer possible. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't ceremonial. It was instinct. What made the discovery even more unsettling was what wasn't there. No inscriptions, no names, no records. In a culture known for documenting its achievements and honoring its dead, this silence was profound. It wasn't an oversight. It was erasure. The evidence pointed toward a function that had never been fully acknowledged in the study of Petra. This was not a tomb. It was not a treasury. It was something else entirely, a space designed to remove people from society, not just physically but historically, a place where individuals could be placed, sealed away, and forgotten. Above it all stood the facade that had captivated the world for centuries. Its beauty, its scale, its intricate design, all of it served a purpose beyond aesthetics. It drew attention upward, outward, away from what lay beneath. It was a distraction, a masterpiece engineered not just to impress, but to conceal. For generations, people stood before it, photographing its grandeur, never considering that the real story was hidden below their feet. This changes more than just the understanding of a single structure. It forces a reevaluation of Petra itself. If one of its most studied and visited monuments conceals something so significant, what else remains hidden? How many other spaces were designed with similar intent? How much of the city's true function has been misunderstood? The discovery doesn't provide all the answers. In many ways, it raises more questions than it resolves. Who were these people? Why were they chosen? What circumstances led to their confinement? The absence of records ensures that those answers may never be fully known. But one thing is clear. The narrative of Petra as simply a city of beauty and trade is incomplete. Beneath its artistry lies a more complex reality, one that includes control, exclusion, and deliberate silence. The structures were not just built to be admired. Some were built to hide. And for over 2,000 years, they succeeded. Even now, as the truth begins to surface, it remains incomplete. The desert still holds its secrets. The stone still guards its stories. And somewhere beneath the layers of history, there are likely more spaces waiting to be discovered. spaces that were never meant to be found, holding truths that challenge everything we thought we knew.